Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Everyday Recovery. My name is Jim Lang. I'm the Senior Vice President and Director of Men's Addiction Recovery here at America's Keswick. And each week we want to bring you a short devotion that just gives you a window, gives you kind of a glimpse into the curriculum that we go through at the Colony and at Barbara's Place. And so last week at the Colony we talked about surrender. And the way we really frame it as we talk to the men about surrender is that surrender really is the key to victory. And we talk about different areas of our lives that we need to surrender. This is an all-encompassing surrender. And as the men go through their lives, they're not only surrendering over the physical things in their lives, but they're surrendering over relationships. They're surrendering over their future plans. They're surrendering. This is a total surrender. Jesus' call in our life is total surrender. Deny self, take up cross daily, and follow after Christ. To pick up one's cross, that imagery should bring to mind that we are dead men walking, that nothing belongs to us, that we totally have surrendered our lives for the call of Christ. And part of that surrender is really surrendering our past. Many men come into the program with just very difficult things behind them. Not only the addiction, but a lot of the things that led to the addiction induce a lot of shame. It induces a lot of guilt, and it is difficult to put some of those things in the past, but we are called to surrender those things over them. And part of that surrender is understanding that in God's economy, there's never any waste. There's never an experience you have or something that's happened to you or in your past that God will not use. Those things might have been difficult. They might have been painful. There might need to be some deep level counseling that you need to help you process through those difficulties. But God will use those things. And I always look to the story of Moses when I speak to the men about this, about surrendering our past over to God, allowing Him to redeem it. And Moses, if you know the story of Moses, he was born at a time where he was born in Egypt, and the Israelites were enslaved to the Egyptian people, and the number of Israelites just kept growing, and Pharaoh was getting so concerned that the Israelites were going to overthrow the Egyptians or join with their enemies and overthrow them. So he put out this edict that all the male babies, when they were born, were to be thrown into the Nile and killed. But Moses' mother trusted her son to God's sovereignty, and she places him in a basket and sends him down the Nile River. And he's discovered by Pharaoh's daughter and actually gets adopted by her and grows up with the privilege of living in the king's household. And he becomes a man. And in Exodus chapter 2, verse 11, I'm going to pick up the story there. And it says, "Years later, after Moses had grown up, he went out to his own people and observed their forced labor." And so he goes out and he sees that the Israelites are being forced to work. And it says he saw an Egyptian striking a Hebrew, one of his people. Looking all around and seeing no one, he struck the Egyptian dead and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you attacking your neighbor?" "Who made you a commander and judge over us?" the man replied. "Are you planning to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses became afraid and thought, "What I did is certainly known." When Pharaoh heard about this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. And Moses ends up living in that wilderness of Midian for 40 years tending sheep. And I can imagine during those 40 years that Moses felt like he couldn't be used by God anymore. In his zeal and in his self-centered way, he murdered an Egyptian and had to go on the run. And he probably thought, there's no way that God has a plan for my life that he would just be in the wilderness the rest of his life. But God uses that time in the wilderness, when Moses is on the run, to prepare him to shepherd his people out of slavery. And so Moses had a past that induced shame in him. That I'm sure he replayed that story over and over in his head again and again, and just was filled with guilt, filled with shame. And God used that to prepare Moses for the high calling he had on his life to deliver his people from slavery. And so as we look back on our past, we have some things in our past that I'm sure cause us to still blush in shame, to still, when we look back on them, we question, why would we ever do that? But we need to surrender those things over to God, knowing that he has the ability to redeem them. That there is no waste in the economy of God, that he will use every experience, whether good or bad, to prepare us for where we are going, to prepare us for what he has for us. I just look at myself, and I was in addiction for over a decade, and God brought me here, and I went through some difficult times, and he was preparing me for the work that he was going to do here in me now working here and helping others who are in the same situation I was. And so as you surrender your past over to the Lord, have confidence that he will redeem your past. I hope you've enjoyed this short devotion. If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction, I'd love to speak with you. You can give me a call at 732-350-1187, extension 1041, and we'll see you next week.